Hey guys, today I wanted to try something in Polybridge that I've been meaning to do for a while. Before I've made a crossbow, which launched a car with energy stored in springs, and a trebuchet, which launched a car with energy stored in a raised counterweight. I haven't tried launching a car directly with hydraulics though, so that's what I plan on making today. Alright, so I'm starting off in Sandbox like I normally do, and I'm stretching the main islands apart 250 meters, and that's the max distance you can go without modding. So there's three things I just added in were platforms, which they're just to put a car on in case I wanted to launch it. And I'm adding in a few pieces of steel here, and they're going to be part of a lever system. The hope is that I can, like a standard catapult, pull down one side of a lever, and then launch something off the other side. So here I have nothing connected to it, so it just falls to the ground. But now if I add in some steel to base a hydraulic off of, and then add in the hydraulic and attach it to one point of that lever, if I added a bunch of hydraulic phases, as the hydraulic pulls down on one side of the lever, the other side lifts up. And this is what I want, because I want it to be able to yank down and throw something off the other side. So temporarily I'm switching to springs here, and I'm gonna go back to hydraulics, but springs are just easier to work with. So the springs are actually too strong and just shatter the entire thing, which is fine, I guess. So I just gotta reinforce it with a few more pieces of steel. And now as the springs yank down, you can see how fast the other side lifts up. But this still wasn't as fast as I'd like, so I added in a couple more springs, but of course this caused the entire thing to break. So realizing this was probably going to be impossible without unbreakable mode on, I decided to turn that on. So now you can see how it flings up, it's okay. And now I want to add in a bike, just to see how far I can get it to launch. I didn't really think it was going to go too far, but it was worth a quick try. And it was about as expected once I add in those roads. Launches the car up, and then he just falls right back down. Now that looked okay, but that's nowhere near 250 meters, and I honestly don't think I was going to get there. So I decided to work on this second design. Now, this is probably the first time I've actually made a bridge in this game in forever, but it has a rotational point right in the middle. And the idea is I can lift up the bridge using a hydraulic. And you see how that worked there, but it was still pivoting really slowly. I want it to be able to fling something really quickly. So if I move the hydraulic closer to the center, you can see I get a much more extreme movement. And that's pretty fast, but it's still not as fast as I think I would need. So I decided to move to my third design, and this is the one that actually ended up working out. Alright, and now I wanted to try making a 180 degree mechanism. Now the angle itself isn't that important, but I thought I'd be able to do something with it that'd be pretty interesting. So it's pretty simple so far. I just have a triangle and two pieces of steel connected to that triangle, and I can drive it using this hydraulic attached to that point. So as the hydraulic pulls in, you can see how it moves that triangle around 180 degrees. There I didn't quite get it because the geometry is wrong, so I just had to adjust it a little bit more, make the triangle a bit smaller. I accidentally had it double size, and now you can see as it pulls in, rotates the full 180 degrees. And then pushes back. So far it's cool, it's not that impressive. I want to improve on this a little bit before I start messing with it even more. The first thing I want to do is create a bigger triangle setup, because you see there it was very small, and the problem is, as it rotates back and forth, I'm a little worried it's going to be very susceptible to deforming, and especially if I have it under a really high load like a car, that's going to be an issue. I can achieve this by creating some sort of leverage system, and I'm doing that here with these few pieces of steel, but as the hydraulic pulls in, it sort of just deforms the steel, because again, I messed up the geometry. I actually undersized this one. It was half as big as it should have been. So after adjusting that, you can see as the hydraulic pulls in and out, that collection of steel points sort of pivots back and forth. That top joint is moving a very far distance, and that's what I want. So now it's actually exactly the same as before. I just have to add in a triangle and then a piece of steel connecting that triangle to that lever. And now as it moves back and forth, you can see how the triangle rotates 180 degrees. Alright, and now I feel confident enough in this design that I want to improve upon it a bit. So if I stack two of these on top of each other, I can create a 360 degree rotation. It's actually not that useful of a rotation since it moves around. You'll see it doesn't just pivot in place, it rotates around itself a little bit too. But the important thing is that it moves very quickly. And with two of these, it was working pretty well, so I thought, let's just add a third, why not? And this seemed to work pretty well too. And now it's really whipping around, and this should be able to launch the car decent distance. But since 3 was working so well, I thought, might as well just go crazy with it. So I added 6 of these on top of each other, and there did seem to be a problem where even in unbreakable mode, where none of the steel beams could break, they could still deform, and that was causing enough problems where it was at least unpredictable, and it makes it very frustrating to work with this stuff when it's unpredictable. So I went down to 4 thinking, oh, maybe that'll work. But the problem is, even with 4 of these stacked on top of each other, it was still causing problems with instability. So I decided to go down to the best thing I could do that was still stable, and that seemed to be 3 of these mechanisms stacked on top of each other. So that's what I got here. So I could put the car on it and have a road at the end there, and now as it rotates, it flings the car over. It was a decent start. It wasn't awesome, but I could definitely improve with that. So the first thing that I thought to do was, instead of having a flat road up top, I can have more of like a ramp system using some slanted roads. And this should hold the car on for a different amount of time and allow it to slide off the end. So I have that here, just 3 pieces of road. And now as it rotates, it kind of grabs the car a bit better. There it grabbed it actually too well and still launched it slightly into the ground. There it didn't grab it well enough and it launched straight up. But here I get it in a good enough position. So as it rotates, it really launches the car forwards. I think it was about a third of the way it needs to. So the last thing I want to do before I start actually messing around with the final design is adding a checkpoint. And this allows the car to drive onto this flipping mechanism and then get thrown. And the reason I want to do this is so that I can have it be externally triggered, so that once the car enters the, ramp system I have, it then gets thrown. You'll see why I wanted to have this instead of it just getting immediately thrown in a little bit. But I just move this back down, and works the same way as before, except it starts farther down, so it doesn't go quite as far, maybe a quarter of the way, kind of a third. But the first improvement I thought was I can use diamond hydraulics instead of regular hydraulics. Now, I use these like all the time, so I think it's kind of becoming a joke on my channel, but diamond hydraulics are great for a few reasons. The first one is that diamond hydraulics can contract a further distance than regular hydraulics, which isn't super important here, but it's one of the things they can do. Some of the other things is they can be a bit more powerful than regular hydraulics, since you have multiple hydraulics that are all pulling together. And lastly, they contract a bit faster than normal hydraulics, since they have to contract a further distance in the same amount of time. So that's really what we're going for here, is the speed on them, and I guess the power as well. But once I add them in, it's about the same. It gives me a better launch, but it performs basically the same way. So the second optimization I realized I could make is adding in a second one of these things behind the first one. Now, it looks a little ridiculous, but it actually should work pretty well. Since they're identical mechanisms, they should behave the same way, and therefore I should get twice as much power when I'm flinging the car. So I connect them, and I forgot to anchor it, so the thing sort of falls apart. So after remembering to do that there, now the car falls on, and reaches its checkpoint, and then gets flung, and it flings in the exact same way. But this time, it has a bit more power behind it, so it can get about halfway. Now, I could do quite a few things to get it to go all the way to the end, but I think it'd be probably cooler if I just have a second one in the middle that catches it and then throws it to the end again, sort of as a trade-off. So I just have to tell it to not contract at the same time as the first one. I want it to wait a little bit longer, so that once the first one flings, the car can get into the second one, and then I want the second one to go. There I had a bit of a miss, it was a bit too far back, so I just gotta move it forwards a bit. And now it's super close. I have this crazy shave, and this happens a lot. So my solution was just to increase the time delay a bit so that the phase started a bit later, so that the car could get in first and then it would launch it. Now there it caught it, which is the important thing, but it launched it straight into the lake. And I can fix this just by adjusting how the ramp lets it go. So if I give it just a little bit less of an extreme angle, it lets it fly off a bit earlier, and you see it reach the end island. So this looked good, but I'm not done yet. We need to get it back home. And this should be pretty easy compared to everything else we've had to do, because I should just have to copy that mechanism, put it at the end, and then put it in the middle again. So I'm just copying that back over, putting some fixed joints down to lock it in place, and then moving that stop checkpoint. And now the bike gets to the end, turns around, and then the second mechanism can fling it. And it behaves pretty well, as you'd expect, but not as well as I'd like, and I want it to go a bit further so that I could overcome that first flinging mechanism thing, whatever I'm going to call them. So I added a third set of these hydraulics, I guess, to fling the car forwards, or the bike. I'm going to keep messing that up, aren't I? And this time it worked very well. It was actually too extreme of an angle. So if I let it release a little bit later, it should fling way further. So I fixed that, and then also add in a third mechanism, I added my fourth mechanism into the middle, and the bike gets in there, and then flings to the end. And it actually overshoots, which I was not expecting. It just barely doesn't fall off the main island. So I'm going to have to sandbag that last mechanism just a little bit so it doesn't go quite as far. But I can move the checkpoint flag to the bottom, and here's a full showing of everything that's going to happen. So while this isn't as technical as some of my other things I've made, such as the Strandabeest, it was still a lot of fun to make, and it's always fun to watch that car fly. So if you want to see more of this content, feel free to subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask below, and until next time.